session with really getting everybody into that mindset. If you're part of a community, if you're a caregiver, if your family member has a rare disease, you are the experts. So when we talk about Beginner's Guide to Community Activation, you're coming to the table with that expertise. As intimidating or unnerving as it can be, since there are often new paths to travel, whether it's with regulatory agencies or industry, don't lose sight of the fact that no one knows more than you about this lived experience, and that gives you expertise that no one else has. My name is Wendy, and I actually lead the patient experience team for a drug development company focused on rare disease called Alexion. And we've built an engagement model with having people in our organization who 100% of their role is to engage with patient advocacy groups and individual patients all along their disease experience or caregiver journey. And within my role, really, our focus is to bring insights in from the communities. So we engage with a lot of organizations and a lot of people at different stages, and happy to share and answer any questions that you might have. We're going to start the panel with introductions and a little bit of background from my two esteemed colleagues here. And I know that it was mentioned we'll have Q&A at the end, but interrupt us. This session is really for all of you and meant to think about what questions you might have and how we could help answer them or put you in touch with the right resources. And I'll just start by saying, when I think about Beginner's Guide to Community Activation, and I've worked with communities that are very nascent in their organization, so not really big corporate type patient advocacy organizations, but much smaller mom and dads and people at their kitchen table trying to make a difference. I often say to people that I work with, think about it from three perspectives: connect, collaborate, and create. And connect to me is the most important, because those connections are what drive innovative change and opportunity to really get things done. And it means connect with everybody. Talk to the guy driving the bus, talk to the CEO of a company, talk to every single person, because you don't know where that connection is going to happen. I had a mom reach out to me years ago. Her daughter had a rare collagen 6 disorder, and there were maybe 6 known in the world at the time. And she said, I called 30 pharmaceutical companies and no one else took my call. And in talking to her, our company wasn't working on a program for her daughter's condition, but I certainly know people a lot smarter than me that could help her. And we were able to create this network of connection for her. Ultimately today, they have a mouse model and they have an early preclinical asset. So reach out to everybody. Don't give up when the first 10 people don't take the call. Connections are really important. Collaborate. We were talking even earlier, there's such a need to reach across the aisle and really collaborate with each other. Don't hold data close to your chest. Don't wait for publication. Really collaborate early and often. And if you're working with people who don't want to do that, find a new collaborator, because the only way to make this happen as fast and in meaningful a way as possible is to collaborate. And then create is kind of that catch-all for me. It's create opportunity, create situations where you can drive change, and create the chance to really share your story and get people to care. So I think about it, the 3 C's: connect, collaborate, and create. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. I really like that you talked about patient experience, because that's really what we're doing. We do a lot of patient advocacy, but really what we bring is that patient...
Introduce yourself first.
Sorry, I will get into that. So I'm Kim Stevens. I am currently president of Project Alive. I am also the executive director of the Muenzer MPS Research and Treatment Center. And most importantly, I'm the mom to a boy with MPS II, or Hunter syndrome, who is now 13. Yeah. So I do love what you said, because it is the patient experience. Another thing that I really love that you said was, we are the experts. Anybody can read the science, can figure it out, talk to scientists, talk to PIs, but we really live it every day. And I think that's something that we bring to this model here. And so, part of my journey was Cole was diagnosed when he was 2.5. And I didn't jump right into advocacy, because, those first years of diagnosis, you're just sort of swimming, just trying to keep your head above water. And so that's really what I was doing, trying to figure out, well, how do I get him treatment? How do I get him in clinical trials? And through that process, I really learned that I needed to get involved. And I was working a full-time job at that time. I continued to work a full-time job, but I really saw that need for somebody to step up into that advocacy role. So I joined Project Alive 5 years ago as the president, and you know, we were working on research, and that was really important. We were working on a gene therapy trial, but we also saw a need to work across with all of the companies that were coming in our space that were doing research themselves. And that really took us far. We now have 3 clinical trials, open enrollment right now. And part of that is because we were working so closely and Project Alive was doing that. And during that time, the leading researcher in MPS, Dr. Joseph Muenzer, asked me a couple of years ago, he said, Kim, if I build an MPS center, will you move to North Carolina and run it? And I was like, absolutely.
She said, I have the accent, so I'll be
So I already got the southern accent down so I can come. But absolutely, right? I mean, I was saying, yes, I'm going to come. You saved my child's life because he was leading the clinical trial that my son was in. And so that's how it sort of evolved. So it's not like you just jump in, or for me it wasn't. It was sort of more of a gradual, okay, this is going to be a full-time thing. And we'll talk more about this, but part of what I think about when you're getting started is thinking about where do you start? And you know, as we're all working so hard for research dollars, I think about where can you get the most sort of bang for your buck on those sorts of things. And a lot of people will start, you know, reaching out trying to do clinical trials. And that's great, and I encourage that, but clinical trials right now, from the beginning to the end, are, especially if it's a gene therapy, are really expensive. So I encourage you just to step back and take sort of a inventory of where are we? Do we have a mouse model? Do we have folks already in the industry? Do we have a disease that's similar that we can work with? And you're going to talk more about finding mentors. And that's a huge piece of it, right? Find someone else that started where you are and shadow them. I know I definitely did that with Cure Sanfilippo. I was like, oh, what are you all doing over there? So those are some of the things we'll talk more about. And as Wendy said, please interrupt us because this is for you. We can sit up here and talk all day, but if it's not valuable for you, then please ask us. But you want to?
Kasey? Yeah. Hi, I'm Kasey Woleben, founder of Rare Village. I just want to start off by saying I am a rare mom. I've been a rare mom since 2014. My son was diagnosed with Lee syndrome, which is a mitochondrial disease, and I just want to shout out, it's Mitochondrial Disease Awareness Week. Do we have any mitochondrial families in here? So all week, so we all have mitochondria. Anyway, so like Kim said, you know, it's a nightmare when your child first gets diagnosed with a disease. It's just, you don't know what to do. You are the expert, and you're taking care of your child who's critically ill. And so what I wanted to do was, me and my co-founder Gina Hand, she's not here today, we both have our own independent disease organizations. What we wanted to do is, with Rare Village, is help bridge that gap of the rare diseases who, you know, they're all small, you know. So if you don't want to start your own 501c3, you can come under our umbrella, 501c3 umbrella, and raise your funds and go to do your research like that. And we are coming up with a playbook soon that will be available, but in essence, that's what Rare Village is. I'm so happy to be here, and like Wendy and Kim said, please, this is for you guys, and collaboration is very, very important. Like the 3 C's, those are our 3 pillars as well. So.
Thank you so much. Kasey, let's start with you. So you think about community activation. What does that mean to you? And take yourself back to 2014. Your child was diagnosed with a disease that you can at least pronounce, but I would assume you knew nothing else about it. So how did you go from that time in your life to building Rare Village, but more importantly, community activation? What does that look like for you?
Right, that's a great question. of course, the first 6 months, were a blur, and I don't want to go back there, but you Google, and Dr. Google tells you, your child has 2 months to live, 2 years to live, and it's terrible, and you're frantic, and you're looking around for anything, any type of hope. And so the first thing I did was look for other Lee syndrome families, right? I want to connect with them. I want to see what's going on in the research field and whatnot. And one thing that I noticed about Lee syndrome was there really wasn't a community, a strong patient community. And that is important to have that strong patient community and educate your community about how drug trials work. Like what's the roadmap to a cure? Because it's not just a clinical trial. There's a lot of different things that happen that we have to do as patient organizations to get it to that clinical trial. So I forgot the question, but
so you entered this community. I always say when I'm educating people internally that I work with, that it's the people in this room who are brought to this space not because they went to school to get a degree in this or because they chose this as a career, but because of a often tragic diagnosis and as volunteers. You come from that space and you're now truly a community leader and you've activated a community. So when you look back, what's a highlight from the experience that got you to Rare Village and where you are today?
Right. So I just want to say that why I'm here today to empower families to create cures. We all can do it. We just have to push through. It's hard work, but no one else is going to do it. We have to do this, and you can't do it alone. I would say the highlight would be on my Cure Mito side, and that's creating the largest global patient registry. For our patient community. We have over 300 patients enrolled in over 35 countries. It's been a huge undertaking that's taken us only 2 years to build, but that's really truly been a highlight for me.
I did the same thing. And did you strategically identify that a registry was a gap and a need in the community and then galvanized the community around supporting the registry?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's thinking about like clinical trials, right? How do we get to a clinical trial and what are we missing? And so I noticed in our community, we were missing that patient registry. We didn't know if a clinical trial does become available, who's going to be in the clinical trial? Nobody knows. There's really not a registry, global registry around. So that was the first step that we took.
Thank you. And then Kim, you and I first met years ago when I was working on Hunter syndrome, and Cole, I can't believe he's 13. When Cole was diagnosed with MPS, was a trial immediately offered to you, or did that come later?
No, there was a clinical hold on the clinical trial. There was from the FDA at that point. So there were 2 years where I was between diagnosis and when he finally got into the clinical trial. So, during that time I had to be his biggest advocate. I had to be very loud, make sure everyone knew who we were and that we wanted to be in that clinical trial. And that was important. And part of that journey was making sure that I was in front of the PI that was running the clinical trial, who happened to be Dr. Muenzer, who's now my boss. But coming back to our community activation, I think about when I came into the space, in 2012, and we had a couple of organizations. I think we had about 4 or 5 that were active in Hunter syndrome, but they were kind of spread out, and this person's raising money for this, or not. This group's not sure what they're raising money for, but they feel like they need to do something. And then we had Projects Live, and so really part of it was looking at this sort of landscape and saying, okay, we're all working for the same purpose. And that's what, and I'll talk in another session tomorrow about playing nicely in a sandbox together, but really looking at that and saying, making sure we're not working at cross purposes, right? But, you know, if this group is raising $250,000, this group is $200,000, and this is $1,000, how do you put all of that together so that you can work together and you know, do a larger sort of push with that? And I think part of when I came in as the president for Project Live, it was, you know, we're all going to work together whether we like each other or not. Because, you know, if you keep your mission up there and say, we are all working to save our kids' lives, right? And Hunter syndrome is a progressive disease. And, you know, my own child thinking, I mean, it's that he's 13, but then there's always in my mind, kids pass away in their second decade of life. So, you know, it's always in my mind. So I'm running really, really fast. But to get back to what I was saying, you know, bringing that group, and I always tell anyone that will listen, we don't have time for infighting. We need to be able to come together as much as we can. We also need to make sure that we're reaching out to other organizations. I mean, look around you. These are people that you can reach out to that may be at the beginning. They may be a little further along than you, but you can have these conversations. So I really encourage you to find a mentor. That's going to be important. But also look to your community. Who are the people that are very vocal? Can you bring them in to join a board? And I see a lot of nonprofits come in and there's one person trying to do it by themselves. You've got to have a board. Mm-hmm. You know, even if it's just a board of advisors, that they don't have to have a formal role. And then people say, well, how do you start a board? You just ask people, right? And then you put them on your website and that's your board. Right? And so that's what you've got to do, but you've got to have people helping you, right? Because if you keep doing it alone, then you're going to have burnout. So I always think that's the first. And you know, your board may start out with your 3 best friends that are just really excited about wanting to help, right? But I think that's so key. And then you start looking out in the community, and then you have your website, and then, you know, or your Facebook group, or however you want to communicate. And you know, then along that, you start your registry. But I think really having that plan, and a lot of us, when we come into it, we're just like, we have to do something, right? I have to do something. I can't save my kid's life, but I need to do something, right? And so I think having that plan and really sitting down with someone and saying, here's what we would like to do with our organization, and here are the people we're going to reach out to, is really important right from the beginning, so that you're not just raising money and then saying, who do I give this to, right?
I think it's also important, there are often more than one organization, mm-hmm. even in teeny tiny communities. Yeah. And everybody brings something different to the table and organizes around a specific, what they perceive to be gap or need in the community, and that's all okay. So that there is a lot of, you know, challenges within some of these rare disease communities where groups don't get along. But if we can eliminate that and just really believe that everybody comes to the table for a reason, to fill a gap or fill a need, that, you know, that all matters. But it is important to be very clear about what you're trying to accomplish, because as you bring in those partners to the table and those collaborators, being able to articulate, this is what we intend to focus on, not forever, but for the next period of time, really helps clarify how you can then partner and what you can bring to the table. And from an industry perspective, I've been leading patient advocacy with drug sponsor companies for a very long time. And we've worked with a lot of organizations that do a lot of walks and do a lot of fundraising, and that's really important. I encourage each and every one of you, though, to come to the table with industry with a much higher goal in mind. Don't just seek sponsorship dollars or support for a walk. That's important and that will come, but you bring so much more to the table, again, as experts in the disease experience and the true unmet need. So expect that scientific conversation. Expect to have a seat at the table to inform, what does that drug development process look like, or what does that access schedule look like? Where can you contribute at a more strategic level, have a seat at the table, but come in with that expectation, because really that's where we all need to be. And I'm really trying to figure out how to break down those silos and get everybody to the table. Again, the fundraising is very important, and most of the nonprofit community groups start with that focus. But do that and come to the table really asserting your place at the table, particularly with industry sponsors. And then one way to do that is to figure out, who do you need to go to? So most of the drug companies, even very small ones today, have a patient advocacy type role. And I can tell you, one of my dear friends today from the DMD community in the UK was in Boston visiting friends, drove by a building with the name of a company that he recognized. He parked his car and came in and said, my son has Duchenne and I want to meet the patient advocacy person. I was with a tiny company, we barely had a sign on the door and he just barged in. It worked. Like, there are all different ways, right? So just find the person. In a lot of these small companies, that might be the CEO. Again, you've got the gravitas, you have the experience, you have the seat at the table. So if it's the CEO, sit down with the CEO. But don't hesitate to start making those calls and find out who the people are in these companies that can help you and connect you.
I do want to say one thing. Don't be intimidated by larger disease organizations if you have several in your disease. You know, we all have a seat at the table, and grassroots efforts are moving the needle forward fast. So please don't be intimidated.
Can you give an example?
Well, I can. So CureMido is my son's disease foundation that we founded, and we're just a small volunteer-run, parent-led organization, and there are several other mitochondrial disease, larger, well-known organizations out there. And when we first started infiltrating the space, you know, we were questioned, you know, and why? We already have a group, you know, for this disease. Well, no, you don't. We're specifically for Leigh syndrome. And we stayed and fought, and now we do have a seat at the table. And pharmaceuticals industry, they look to us, and we didn't quit. And although it would have been easier just to say, you know what, go ahead, other groups, just do what you're doing, but knowing in my heart that they're not doing the work that I know could be done was really needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So. I think what you said, I love the word gravitas. You know, really thinking that you do have a seat at the table. We started with saying that you are the expert on the disease, right? And I think, you know, one of the things I did right at the beginning is I wanted to meet the CEOs of all the companies that were in our space, right? And I sometimes had to start with a patient advocate. Mm-hmm. And some, I would just speak, and you probably know this already, Wendy knows about it. If somebody asks me to speak, I speak. I don't know who the group is sometimes, I'm just gonna speak, but you don't know who's in the audience, right? And someone in the audience heard me speak, and then they heard that and they were gonna speak at a company, a large gene therapy company, and they came back to me and they said, hey, Kim, I can't speak at this, can you do it? And I said, absolutely. And I show up, and you know, now I talk to the CEO every month, right? We have a standing meeting, and he's helping to mentor me because I didn't know really what gene therapy was. It's like, let's talk about it. You know, what are we doing in this space? So I think that's really important. And one of the things I found when I came into rare disease, you know, over 10 years ago, is the pharmaceutical companies are not our enemies. We get this set up a lot that we're knocking heads. They're not, you know. And I was just talking with a friend earlier, and it's like, oh, the pharmaceuticals, and he was saying this is not, you know, the pharmaceuticals, they need to make money. Yes, I want them to make money, because if they don't make money, they're not going to stay in business, and they're not going to have a cure or something for my child, right? So, but they're very interested in hearing what we have to say. And part of this, you know, I'm coming from my son's in a clinical trial. Well, it failed. And he's still getting drugged, but it failed. And so part of what I'm doing now is going to those pharma companies and saying, listen, I don't want you to make the same mistakes. Let's talk about it, right? Let's think about how this trial was designed. Please don't make the same mistakes. And so I sit down with them and I just share that story and I say, this is what went wrong, right? And so thinking about what do you bring? What can you talk to these companies about? Because they want to hear you. And they want to talk. I mean, part of it too is like our big, for lysosomal storage disease, our big conference is World in February. Yeah, I'm there every single time. I'm contacting the patient advocacy group to make sure I have meetings set up with it. Now I'm 5 years in, they call me and say, Kim, are you going to World? We'd like to set up a meeting and talk to you, or we'd like to bring you into the company and talk. And one of the biggest things, and I hope you walk away with this knowing, whenever I talk to a company, I always say to them, you know, we need you, and we need you to come up with cures and treatments for our kids. And I'm the most passionate person in this room, and I need you to get to work, and I need you to move quickly, right? Because they need to know this urgency, right? It can't be that they're just going to work and doing their job, and it's another day, and it's February, and it's March. We need to make sure that we are there urging them on and to move quickly, more quickly than what they're doing. Because I always end up talking with them, and I'm like, okay, now great, go back to work.
But I'll share a story. The pull through of that after you all leave the building is so palpable and real, and you never know who is going to be motivated and moved by the story. Everyone's inspired, and that's great, and there's a lot of that, but the reality is the right person remembers that connection and remembers that story. And this is a very true story. About 8 years ago, we had a young man in to speak with his mom, and he has a rare bone disease, and he shared his story, and he was very influential. He was a child, very influential. But then in the context of sharing his story, he said to the researchers, thank you so much for this drug, but the injections really hurt. And the research team asked a few questions, and this drug required 2 to 3 times a week of injections. So it saved his life, and he was out of a wheelchair because of this drug. That's amazing. But thankfully, what the research team heard was, but it's not enough. And today, we have in clinical trial the next gen of that drug that has a much more favorable schedule of infusion, much lower volume, much less damage to veins. Like it is one of the more moving experiences I've had in my entire career, and it was because that family came in and shared their story. So it doesn't have to be, well, we have a mouse model with genotype XYZ 1, 2, 3. It's really, honestly, the experience that you have with these conditions is a driver of drug development. So to your point, you know, it's a huge ask and it's a big time commitment for everybody to do this, but it has a very powerful impact. Kasey, in your experience with founding Rare Village, what would you say are the biggest takeaways you've learned from community activation as smaller groups have come into Rare Village?
That's a great question. I would say that our families that are with Rare Village they know now, they are educated now on the process of drug development. Even though they are family funds or smaller foundations that are going to become nonprofits, they just it's just exciting to see people grow and guide them where they need to be. And sometimes people don't need to start their own foundation. Sometimes it is okay just to be with a fiscal sponsor. And but just, to me, it's people out there creating awareness, raising money for rare disease. That's amazing. So I applaud us all for doing that. So it's hard work.
It is hard work. It's the most important work that everybody can do, though. It sounds like there's a lot of talk about community activation focused on drug development. Working for a drug developer, I can assure you all there is no real process. So as much as we talk about the drug development process, it's convoluted, it's windy, it's tricky, and there are so many inputs and outputs that have, definitely scientific rigor, but almost as many that have little to do with the science. So if you're confused and not sure how to navigate, it's not you. It's the way the system works, and it's burying data in potential someday, maybe down the road, there'll be a publication, all the way to, well, regulators want us to have the 6-minute walk test, but we don't care about that. Like, it's a mess. So drive the course, share what you know. If the question is around, these endpoints and outcomes, do they matter? Be honest, because it's the only way we can design trials that ultimately will benefit the people that need to benefit from them. Yes?
Hi. Question. What type of prevalence are the companies looking for? I'm fighting my second 1 in a million rare disease now. And so, from the first one I survived. I started a nonprofit, but we had difficulty getting traction with the pharma company. We were just less than 1 in a million. So this is the second disease that I've got like that. So what are your thoughts on that?
So you should play the lottery. And I thank you for sharing. I think that's really powerful. And I'm not an expert in this. I've been on the industry side for a very long time, and prevalence certainly matters because, as Kim said, these are for-profit companies. Right or wrong, that's the business model, and we have to be able to show a return on investment and all of those things. So low prevalence diseases are hard to build a business case for. But low prevalence diseases coming together aren't that anymore. And I think there's more of an appetite for that type of drug development today than there ever has been. There's also a lot of cross-therapy learnings, and now with AI and all of that type of intervention, we're able to learn a lot more quickly about like a group of neuromuscular disorders or lysosomal storage disorders. So I think the landscape is changing, and then there are a number of companies that are focused specifically on N of 1 type conditions. So I'd be happy to circle back with you and put you in touch with some of them, but that is a big challenge. But I think as much as you can quantify the data and the experience and extrapolate how that can be in larger prevalence diseases, the more opportunity there is to repurpose or reposition medicines for the less prevalent conditions. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, the N of 1s, companies will do that if it will take them forward on something, whether it's they're checking out, is this vector safe, or is this delivery system good? So they will do that. I mean, Hunter syndrome there's 500 boys across the United States, so it's not super popular one, but
Hunter syndrome gained attention because lysosomal storage diseases and enzyme replacement therapy. So it's the same concept, and finding that part, that's a great community activation focus.
Finding someone that's in the same area and that you have sort of a similar disease concept is so important.
And an investigator that's interested.
And an investigator that's interested.
There's a question in the back.
Too.
Yeah.
So this is actually a follow-up on the low prevalence, and also an ask to circle back to where you started on the connection piece. So I work for Sophie's Hope Foundation, Cure GSD1B. I'm a little nervous.
Please don't be. This is your community.
So we have the mouse model, we have the registry. The gap that I think a lot of organizations here might also be in is the outreach to patient populations outside of the United States, outside of Europe. We know we have significant populations in harder to reach places: Russia, China, Turkey, India. Do you have any suggestions on connection and global outreach?
I will. I'll speak to that. For our registry, global registry, we specifically reached out to the centers of excellence in particular countries and emailed these doctors to spread our registry, to share, and it's also Facebook. We have private groups, and just activating families from other countries. They've got their little group of rare families with the same disease, and they share with that, so it's like a trickle effect. And Facebook has been really good for us, the private group, and connecting with the global patient community.
Yeah, we do a lot of, Facebook is where we all come together, and we'll get requests from Russia or Serbia, and that's how we find each other, or someone will hear about, but it's part of this awareness, like for Project Live, so that they will come to us and find us, and so we have to get your name up there as well. But Facebook, looking at that, I mean, I've found people, and when I moved to North Carolina, they'll post something about a rare disease, and I'm like, what rare disease? And turns out it's an MPS, and I'm like, oh, we need to talk to each other. You find people that way as well. But I think too, if we're going back to how do you sort of get started, and how do you find those PIs that are going to do the research, or who are the experts and those sorts of things, is really look at who's publishing data, and it might be animal data. But you know, if you go out there, there are probably some scholarly works. If it's not about your disease, it might be about something very similar. And look at their names on there. And just in scientific, it's the first and the last names that are the ones that are doing a lot of the, well, they're the names, right? And then you have all the other people in the middle doing the work. Don't tell them I said that.
No, it's the lead author and the last author, although there's some changes underfoot to change that. But I think what you were saying is you have a mouse model and you have a registry, and so you're looking for how do you activate interest in this research. And I would, similar point, but for the mouse model publication work, look at who those key publishers are and what academic physicians they're working with, because that's often the entree to how do we now take this into people and where they live.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to follow up with you after, because we actually, on my team, I have a global team, and we do have people in each of the countries you mentioned except India, and they know a lot of people, so I'd love to help connect you. All right, we have 2 questions. We'll go to you first.
It's hard to see.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kevin Fryer. I'm from Salem Oaks and from RARE New England. I sit on the board there. I was really struck.
He is pure trouble, you guys.
I was really struck by when, I just forgot, Charlene asked, how many people here are first-timers? About half the audience opened or raised their hands. And I sit here and I look at the rock stars. And I say, wow, look how great they look up there. They're poised. They're answering every question. And if I'm the first timer here, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? So I want to ask you something about before you had to do this. What were the strengths? What were the experiences you brought to the table that you've flexed as you're in these new roles?
So I'm going to let these guys answer as the rock stars, but I want to tell you what I experienced on my side. And it is literally people walking through the door, whether that's a Zoom door or a real door, and just stopping us in our tracks to listen to your story. And it sounds so simple and elemental, but that's that first point of connection. And then it's, we have a mouse model. We know this about our condition. I can find every patient for you. What are you doing in clinical research that might apply? It's really putting yourself out there and having that conversation. And I'm telling you, this woman who's now a friend of mine, Sylvie from Panama, 30 companies didn't take her call. And literally, not only did we take her call, 2 weeks later she was in our building and going to Boston Children's from Panama. Like there is somebody out there that's going to listen and bang on those doors until you get that person. But you guys are the rock stars to Kevin's question.
Yeah, well, Kevin, I don't think, I look back on my life and I feel like I was prepared for this because I started, my very first job was a nonprofit working in multiple sclerosis, and I didn't know what multiple sclerosis was, so I had to figure that out. But you know, I think what you were saying, Wendy, about knocking on doors and just starting, that's the hardest thing. And I think the more you start talking and the more you start asking people for help, or you're saying, hey, I need to partner with you on this, that's how you just get better and telling your story. And and I think the biggest thing goes back to what I said before. We're passionate, right? As a fundraiser, now when I work at the MPS Center, I often tell Dr. Muenzer, I'm like, I'm not worried about raising money. How much do we need? I said, because I can tell, I'm not afraid to ask for money because I am trying to save kids' lives, and there's no greater purpose for me than that, right? And if you keep yourself focused on that and not thinking about, and I do still get nervous, but not thinking about, can I talk to this? Do I know the science? I ask questions. If I'm in a room and they'll start talking, and I have a doctorate in business, and they'll start talking medical talk and everything, and I'm like, doctor in business, not an MD. Can we go back to this, right? Because you have to ask questions. Humility is a great thing. You cannot learn if you do not have humility, right? And so then they don't expect you to. They don't expect you to have science degrees, right? You bring a unique experience. So I just think taking that forward with you and understanding how important you are, and then you just do it often. Like I said, every single person that would ask me to speak, yeah, I'm there. I have no idea who's going to be in the audience that might hear it. And last week, or the week before, I spoke at a newborn screening in New York, and I was talking to folks that work in the lab and just imploring them to get to work, basically. And one of the colleagues, she came up to me afterwards, and she goes, well, the talk after you left was, we can't let Kim down. She's going to come back and ask us, what are y'all doing, right? And so that's just, and the whole big thing, and you said this earlier, is relationships, right? You've got to start building those relationships. Don't be afraid to talk to someone. I saw one of my House representatives on the shuttle bus going from and I was like, okay, can I talk to him? And I did, right? And I had to be ready. So you have to have your sort of 5-minute pitch or 3-minute pitch. That's going to be something else too that you can work on and get going. But just keep doing it and realize you have a really great purpose.
So all of that, and also Kevin sits on our advisory board for Cure Mito, so love him, he's awesome. Don't give up, and it's take the help. You know, if you can't do it alone. I tried to do it alone for the first 2 years, and I was burnt out. You know, I thought, I can do this, you know, I want to lead everything, and that's just, you're going to get burnt out. So take the help and ask for help. Don't be afraid.
So let me ask my question again. Before you had your kids, before you knew you were going to do this, what did you do? What did you do for a living?
I worked for 20 years at IBM as an executive coach, communications coach. So I was training other people to talk.
So she's communicating world class right now. Well, she's 20 years experience. She just brought her life experience to it. What about you, Kasey? What did you do before?
So interior design. So I'm the art girl. So has nothing to do with rare disease, but I can make things look pretty.
And making things look pretty is an important thing to do when you're branding and trying to attract people.
Absolutely.
So the point I'm trying to make is that everybody who raised their hand, I'm a first-time person here, I don't know if I can ever do this. What do you do good now?
Yes.
Go do that for this purpose and save kids' lives.
That's right.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah,
We're going to wrap up, but I also want to say, if you don't want to do this, that's okay too. So whatever you need to get through the day and take care of your family, reach out across. We're all here to help in that. And there are the Kims and the Kaseys that are going to change the world and help all of us. If that's not you, if that's not where you are today in your journey, that's awesome too. And please, 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 don't be afraid to ask for help. Thanks, everyone.